The way that I introduce the storytellers isn't with a long list of their achievements, but is with a secret fact. And our first storyteller's secret fact, someone's going to steal this idea and make a lot of money, so let us just know that this was her idea first. She's always wanted to write a Broadway musical adaptation of Frasier. Please welcome Naseem Hrab.
I'm sitting across from this lawyer. I'm 9 years old, we're in an empty classroom, and she's asking me a lot of questions. She wants to know how often I want to see my dad and when. My parents have been divorced for about a year now, and they're still sorting out the visitation rights. I have no idea how to answer her. See, my brothers and I had been seeing my dad every weekend in Guelph since the divorce. And the great dad, who used to spend time making crafts with me and helping me with my math homework and taking my brothers to their tennis lessons, had started napping more and more. So I say to the lawyer, I'd like to do whatever my brothers are doing. I trust them, they're older than me, and we end up seeing my dad every Wednesday night. And we go for a juice, and we have a cupcake, and we go to the bookstore. And we do this all in a mall near my mom's house, our new house in Toronto. And at first, I'm really happy about these visits. But then week by week, less so. And it's going to sound really silly, but at the time I was watching a lot of America's Most Wanted. For those of you who aren't familiar with the show, it's about America's Most Wanted. And in 1991, they actually started showing abduction cases. And I started thinking that my dad was going to abduct me. And there was no reason for me to think this, but I had an active imagination, I'm prone to anxiety, and I shouldn't have been watching the show. So one night, we're out quite late for me as a 9-year-old, and it's getting dark, and I'm getting actually really scared, and my dad is driving us back to my mom's house, and he turns around in the minivan, and he looks at my brothers and I, and he says, I don't think you feel comfortable seeing me anymore. Why don't we take a short break? And I remember going to my mom's house and sitting on the stairs leading to the basement and crying. And not because I was sad, but because I was relieved. And after that, we received a few birthday cards from my dad and a phone call here and there, and then those stopped. And we settled into our life in Toronto, and it was nice. 12 years later, I'm pacing back and forth in my mom's living room. The house is filled with people, maybe about 20 aunts, uncles, family friends, my mom, my brothers, my cousins. And there's platters of Persian food everywhere. Kebab, basmati rice, salad, lamb, the works. And none of this registers for me because I'm just so filled with dread. Days earlier, my mom had come home from grocery shopping, and she asked me what I wanted for dinner. Chicken, I said. And she answered this by saying, by the way, I spoke to your aunt today. She's been in touch with your dad. She's been trying to reach him for years, and he finally responded. Can you believe it? I think she's making the whole thing up. So I told her to invite him to the barbecue. My mom then shows me this photograph that my aunt gave her of my dad next to a car. And my mom is convinced that this photograph is old, that as if my aunt pulled it out of an album or something. And I look at the photograph and I see that there's nothing old about this photo except for my dad. And so I'm back in the living room, I'm pacing, and I hear there's a commotion at the door. So I peek around the wall and I look down the hallway to the front door and I see my dad walking through. And I don't know what to do, so I pop back behind the wall. And I can hear my family members greeting him enthusiastically. And eventually he makes his way to the living room, and I see my father for the first time in 12 years. He's gaunt and gray-haired and weak. He looks nothing like the man I remember. and certainly not the same man who used to carry me on his shoulders. We say hello to one another, and we hug, and we cry, and I remember he was dabbing his eyes with this crumpled up Kleenex that he had fished out of his pocket. "Today is the happiest day of your life," my aunt cries. "Your father is back." I wonder if anyone else is struck by the absurdity of the situation. Instead of asking my father why he disappeared, my mother gives him some lamb. Instead of asking my father where he's been for the last 12 years, my brother offers him a slice of cake. Instead of asking my father, why now? Why today? My aunts and uncles and cousins are all telling me how lucky I am. In Japan, there is this avant-garde form of movement called Butoh, and in it, the actors wear white face makeup and they perform these hyper-controlled movements, rolled back eyes, grotesque faces, silent screams. I feel like that silent scream. And my dad is reciprocating in kind. He takes some lamb, he eats some cake. But all the while, he's not really offering any information about himself. He lets us know that he still works as a psychiatrist in a prison. He recounts the heart valve surgery he had years ago and reminds us about how close he is to his nephew and niece. Is it possible that nothing had changed for him in the 12 years that had passed? I avoid him for the rest of the afternoon and I busy myself clearing up dishes and helping clean up. And then he approaches me and he says, "Hey, do you still play tennis?" And I never played tennis. My brothers did. So I say, "No." "Huh," he says. "You really should have kept that up. What a waste." I want to yell, "Do you remember anything about me? And who are you to reprimand me?" But I don't. I just shrug. And then the day is done. After that, we go for a few lunches with my dad, and these lunches are awkward and trying because he really doesn't offer any more information. And whenever the conversation sort of comes to a halt, one of my brothers is always ready with a superficial question like, "Hey, Dad, what was it like to take the streetcar back in 1970? So the lunches become shorter and shorter and fewer because at a certain point, there's nothing left to say. 3 years later, we're pushing open the door to my father's house, the house we grew up in. He had died days earlier of heart failure. And we were greeted by trash everywhere. Hundreds of books and magazines and newspapers, 4 computers, textbooks of anxiety disorders and substance abuse, 3 air purifiers, a can of baked beans with the spoon still in it, bottles of prescription medications, thousands of lottery tickets, a primer for psychoanalysts, divorce papers, a box of Rice Krispies in the bathroom, 11 car tires. The house we grew up in was unrecognizable. The stairs we used to run up and down, the basement we used to play in, the kitchen where we shared our meals. Every single room is filled with garbage. We had never seen or heard of anything like this before. It was before the television show Hoarders existed. And I remember walking through the house with my brothers, and with every step, the layers of debris would shift under our feet. And my brother's words and my thoughts swirled into one. What the hell is this? What's going on? Did you see all those fruit flies over there? I taped that piece of that out of that coloring book on that wall when I was 7. It's still there. He was a psychiatrist. How could he live like this? Why did he make us the executors? Is this some kind of revenge? I can't take the smell anymore. I've got to leave. Don't leave me in here alone. My father's lawyer connected us with someone who could help. a retired school principal named Larry. Larry did odd jobs in the community. And Larry was methodical and patient and kind, and we trusted him instantly. He carefully sifted through everything. The sleeping bag my dad slept in, the piles of garbage he used as his mattress, the 4 empty beds, the bowl that my mom used to use for her baking, and the used Band-Aid inside it, the patient files that never should have made it to the house. After 3 months and $10,000 in cleaning fees, the remains of my father's unhappiness were gone. But it wasn't all misery. Larry would save choice finds and put them on this brown card table that was in our old living room, and he playfully referred to it as his office. And he would take these items and revel in their significance with us. My grandmother's birth certificate from the Ukraine, family photos, my father's old report cards. This letter that my dad wrote to me in February 1991, 6 months before he decided to stop seeing us. This is what he wrote at the end. As one of my children, I want you never to forget that you are loved, have always been loved, and will always be loved by your father. Your mother loves you, as do your brothers, but I want this too for you. Love is like an envelope around a letter. It offers protection. And if you feel and understand this love, it helps you when sad things happen to you, as life is filled with unexpected surprises, and not all are happy. If you feel loved, it makes your personality stronger, and when you bump your knee, the pain is much less. And if a friend lets you down, the sadness does not last as long. You have a permanent spot in my heart and my mind, as I have told you before. But with all this turmoil, you might forget. When and if you should feel sad, or even when you are happy, think of Guelph. And if you concentrate real hard, you will hear your dad's heart beat. And with each beat, you will hear the words, Naseem, you are love and loved. No instrument can pick this tiny pulse up except your own heart and imagination. Thank you.
Naseem Hrab!